come to think of it, I didn't have much of a childhood. This was a rather stark realization for me on April 29th, my birthday, my 18th birthday. It's April 30th as the date of recording currently for this video, and so that would have been yesterday. I had some hard thoughts on this that, entering adulthood, there wasn't really much of a childhood to speak of. Like, I played a lot of video games and I made a lot of recordings, but those were the most positive things that I did at that time. A lot of my childhood was just being incredibly depressed. That's pretty much been my whole life. And when I would play video games, a lot of the time it would be in order to drown out the sounds of my parents fighting, or, like the sounds of my parents and my brother fighting. Because when my brother was kicked out of the house when he was 16 years old, he was born in 1995, so, that would have been, 2011? So it was 2011 that he was kicked out, and so I was 9 years old when that happened, pretty young. And, it's one of those things where, like, seeing that occur when I was at that age, and I knew why it occurred. I had watched everything as it had happened. My brother had his phone taken away from him by my mom because he was doing drugs and stuff and just causing problems, getting into a lot of arguments with people, being a bit of a dick in general. So she takes his phone away, and he literally punched her. He punched my mom just because she took his phone. And initially my mom was just kind of like, I'll give him his phone back. This is just me. I don't, oh, my baby, my son, blah, blah, blah. She was always like that with him because she was the first child that she had. Never like that with me. But, so my half-brother, he punches my mom in the face over a phone, and immediately my dad is distraught after seeing this. So he, takes him and, like, slams him into the bookcase that's in our closet. They get into a physical fight and altercation with one another. This was after my brother had made a physical threat towards my father and had hit him first. So, if anything, it was, retaliation and self-defense. And my brother had it coming to him after assaulting both of my parents and regularly assaulting me as well. I got a lot of pretty horrendous physical abuse from my brother. He was a real dick. He deserved, he deserved being retaliated towards after, making those moves there. And so, they keep on fighting with one another after he does this shit. And that day forth, a bunch of my stuff in the closet got broken, but I mean, that was fine. He got kicked out, and I have not seen him since, essentially. And I don't want to. He's an asshole. I think he's like what is he, like 25 now? Never gonna see that guy again. Huge fucking asshole. But I never had, I never had much of a childhood because of stuff like that going on. Stuff like that was a pretty regular occurrence in my house. There was just always fighting and yelling and these kind of things going on to where, it never felt like I had much of an environment where I could just be a kid. Like, if you watch my video Understood, I'm kind of taking the best moments from my childhood and then compiling them into one kind of feels good kind of video, because I wanted to show that, I wanted to share that there were good things that were going on. I wanted to share that I had passions that I really cared about, even though there was a great feeling of underlying anxiety that in the narration I was talking about. And those moments with the video games, those moments of creativity after I got my camera at age 7 and I just started recording things constantly and taking pictures constantly, that creativity, that drive, that like obsessive drive to make things and to consume video games and to know everything I could about video games because I just thought they were so cool, that sort of allowed me to find solace in my childhood, to give me something that that would allow me to continue living in this state where, there were just problems all the time between my parents. They were just dealing with their own issues all the time, where, I was just so sad from the emotional residue of taking in all of these people's problems, and of, getting yelled at and things like that. I was told at a pretty young age that I was the reason for my parents' divorce. Yikes. I experienced a lot of horrible physical trauma from my brother. I dealt with what we call in the sex ed business, a bit of a hit and run, a bit of a familial hit and run with someone at my grandpa and grandma's house. My cousins used to always go up there, along with like uncles and aunts and all these different like members of the family. They would just all crowd around in this like giant mansion-esque house that my grandma and grandpa had, near their farm, or like near the plot of land that would consist of their farm, I should say. And everybody would just go up there. It was a yay old time, because the whole family just lived in the same town. It was kind of a, town of just over 1,000 people. Everyone knows one another, this sort of thing. And so they would all go up there all the time, and I would go up there with my brother. And my brother would be, an abusive piece of shit. But when I was really young, and I mean super young, like so young that I could not even properly parse this as it was happening, I dealt with sexual abuse by a member of my mom's family up there. And when I had told my father about this, he was completely shocked. He was like, I didn't even know that the abuse was a bad thing. That's how young I was. I just knew what had happened. And as I had told him this, and he had reacted in such a terrified way after having told him, I just went into the closet and I just kept shaking. I was just in the closet just crying and shaking a whole bunch, and I just refused to talk for essentially the rest of that day. I was a toddler. I didn't know what rape was. And so it was all of these sort of things that were going on when I was younger. These like bouts of abuse and stuff sort of impacted me in a way that would lead to this lifelong depression that you see me experiencing now. And I think because both my parents are depressed, and especially on my dad's side, there's a long history of people being schizophrenic, people being bipolar, people being depressed, people attempting suicide, and a very long history of that, of autism. I'm kind of destined to feel this way. It's not really something I can control. It's just sort of my genetic makeup and the way that I grew up, that I wasn't allowed to have a childhood. Outside of those moments of me gaming and me making stuff with my camera, which I was already interested in a technical sort of almost adult way, like I would think a lot about lighting, I would think a lot about, the way that things would be framed. So I was already thinking about it in technical terms, I just didn't have the words for it. Other than that, I was just, I was dealing with the daily drama of being alive. And I don't think kids, when they're that young, should be thinking about how being alive is just pain, about how being alive is something that you need to actively escape from and ignore. But I had tried to do what I could to put on a happy face, to focus on the things that I loved and indulge in those things. I was really into pets, for example. We had a lot of pets, and I loved my pets. I considered them to be my only true friends in the world. And I just continued to focus and hone in on my pets as much as I possibly could, because I just loved animals a lot. I felt very strong feelings towards animals. It was stuff like that, just like obsessively trying to escape. That was what my childhood was. And when you have to deal with that real shit from such a young age, you're not really granted the ability to have this carefree lifestyle where you're just enjoying the adventure of being alive and exploring what all of that entails. You're just constantly assaulted with the harsh reality of existence, and that should be something that is reserved for adult life, not reserved for childhood and then forever on from that point. But I never got one of those, so it is what it is.